Okay.
Okay, we are live.
Hey
Hello.
everybody.
It has been several weeks trying to get this organized and getting our schedules to converge. Been looking forward to it. We always have good conversations in private, and hopefully we can have a wonderful conversation with everybody else involved too.
That's very true. I think a lot of people are gonna start popping up on the. I'm trying to pull it up. Oh, wait, there it goes. Okay, now it's on. I see it on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Excellent.
Illyria is backstage wrangling like any questions and stuff that come through. So if there's stuff, she'll put it up on the screen so we can see it. So
Very cool.
ask questions. Otherwise, I'm happy to just sort of talk about like where this conversation started and the idea of trying to survive like the past year. Like we're coming up on the anniversary of lockdown and stuff in just a couple of months here. And
It's
I know
amazing.
it's been, yeah, no, seriously, like it's been a year. Like I look back to when was that thing that happened? Was that last year? No, like we just lost last year. Like last year was just sitting at home waiting for COVID to go away.
Exactly.
And the toll that took on people was pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, it's beyond imagination. Uh, I think we're all. I mean, I think we're all like, suspected to be pretty bad, but not to the extent it became. You know. Oh,
Uh
my
yeah,
volume
could you get
being
your
low.
volume up a little bit?
Let's see.
Testing one.
Is this any better? Any better?
I think
One,
so.
two, three.
I mean, I can hear you.
Wait, hold on.
There we go. That seems to be doing something.
Testing one, two, three. Is that better?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I have it on max. I hope that's
Yeah.
okay.
No, we'll do what we can. I mean, and Tariq is always fantastic. Somebody was commenting on your hair, and
Oh,
I
thank
mean,
you.
actually, because I know I've got a lot of my patrons on here, and then there's a lot of your folks following. So we should maybe introduce ourselves.
Very much so, because it's a cross population there.
Yeah.
Oh, you first.
So, yep. Oh, no, no, no,
Oh,
no, no.
okay.
You first, but of course.
Oops. Um, so basically, I'm Tarik Rever. I'm like a model activist, like eco rights activist, and also really for anyone that feels they're being not voiced. So I'm also disabled, so I help those that are disabled as well. Um, I am a non-binary, so in terms of like equality, I'm all about including everybody into that. But on top of that, I'm really always been a big fan of you, um, and and the paranormal philosophy, everything that nature, everything that you embody. And so I've been studying your work for a while, and then you see that in my modeling because I do a lot of like sort of like couture, gothic, sort of
Mm,
fantastical, supernatural type things, and I've done projects where I've done like short films and directed a play and things like nature. So I guess overall, I'm all about using the arts to get across a message. And so now that social media is so strong, I've built up my fan base through Instagram and YouTube and things of that nature. I'm able to find certain issues that maybe are being swept under the rug, and then the people still need help. So I work with a lot of people um, that are in the community that maybe don't have the same access, but they have like a driving passion to help people. So I try to give them a platform to speak, just like how you've done for me today, which I really appreciate.
mm. Well, and you do a lot of work locally in the Houston area, helping marginalized folk and holding them up. So you're Houston based, and I mean,
Uh,
just all around a fantastic person.
oh, I appreciate it. My necklace like exploded. It was just like, was like but yeah, yeah. Speaking of which, like, so Whenever um, there was Hurricane Harvey that hit Houston, um, I found out that whenever a natural catastrophe like that happen or any like major event that creates like a great sense of you know panic and drama things of that nature, it escalates domestic violence, unfortunately, like at least twice. And so I was working on the Houston area women's centers, and I helped run campaigns. Had my wife as a narrator in like a video I like directed and edited, and then I used social media to get that message across, and we got people to donate funds and sanitary pads and everything to help them. And so that was a good example in terms of you know pulling the best of worlds, like social media and also people that are in the infrastructure to help others that just need like extra reach.
So Tariq is a model and an activist, disabled, non-binary, has a fantastic presence on multiple platforms. If you pop around and you do a quick Google search, and I think I'm pronouncing it. Do you prefer Tarik?
I just say Tarik. It's technically way harder to pronounce than that. So I know it's technically
Yeah.
a static. So I don't ask people to say that.
No, well, no, it's like my last name. I tend to default to the longer vowels. Anyway, Tarik, and I apologize. I've been pronouncing it wrong this whole time.
Oh no, I don't even tell people that. So that's my fault.
Mm.
I just assume this is too much. For to have everyone to say it a certain way.
I mean, I'm the same way with my last name. Everybody pronounces it 5 different ways. I kind of don't care that much, but it's one of those ways to honor someone, to try to make sure you do it the way that they like it.
I don't know what it is for your last name. I think it's really cool, and I think of the Kurgan from Highlander.
Mm.
Like Belanger.
I am very, very cool with that association. So for folks who are here who are new to me and my platform, I am, well, and Tariq and I both are members of, and I would say uh, significant figures within the vampire community
Yeah.
across the US. And I'm a little bit more visible these days in the paranormal community. So if you know my face, you've probably seen me on Paranormal State, or more recently on Jack Osborne and Katrina Weidman's Portals to Hell, which was previously Travel Channel and I think now is Discovery Plus. And also see me in the upcoming Fright Club with the Ghost Brothers and Jack Osborne, and that one's a little more lighthearted. And I think that's February 9th coming out. I write a bunch of books. If it goes bump in the night, I've probably written a book on it. Best known book at this point, well, kind of a competition between two, the Psychic Vampire Codex, which is a significant text, especially for the vampire community.
Yes.
But yeah, but also the Dictionary of Demons. And I think one of the places where a lot of folks like you find me, or where we converge, is the ethical guidelines, the focus toward building community, being conscious of like your role as being in service if you are someone who is an organizer or a leader in a community. And those are all values and things that I did my best to convey in the Vampire Codex.
Oh, yeah, you've done and are doing so just incredible work. I mean, to me personally, you set like the gold standard in terms of being very pure and truthful and honest about things. Like you don't take things at face value. You really like dig deep into like what works, what doesn't work. You do your research. There's so much. I mean, there are great things like community, but there also is so much like disorder in terms of like in terms of lore and then reality, and then methodology and some how to accomplish certain things. And so, in terms of like all the options out there, like you are always been consistent, and um, just well respected. I'm just like really thankful I'm here today talking with you.
Well, the first question that I saw pop up is a really good one, and a deep one. It's, how do we think the pandemic is going to affect the youth of today? Like what impact is this going to have on folks, their psyche, their development, their emotional health? I mean, it's a lot, right?
Oh, it's insane. I've already seen it happen. You know, in schools. My stepdaughter has totally reworked her school. I mean, all the kids that come in there, it's like mostly computer. It's like I'd say 90% computer. Maybe they follow up in person only for the really small classes. So they can still control the population within schools to minimize any outbreaks, so to speak. But yeah, it's like it's in one way. Okay, this is interesting. Okay, so
Mm.
in one way, it reminds me of say how at college you have like smaller classes, the teachers can focus more on the students. So in a classroom setting in high schools, you don't really have that. But now with COVID and the pandemic and everything, you have a bit more one-on-one with students and teachers, and they're really like there's like this perspective of a screen, like this is how we're doing. They're using Zoom and things of that nature. So I think in some ways it kind of helps focus on that, but in terms of interacting with like kids with kids and their social life, that definitely diminishes that
Yeah.
part of the equation.
Yeah, I think
Education goes up, but social life goes
yeah,
down.
I think especially it's changing in necessarily the way some people are socialized. I had several friends who happen to have kids around the same time, and basically their babies have grown up and become toddlers during the pandemic when there's no contact. So it's basically, mom and mom or mom and dad and baby and no one else. The kids' sole social group are the cats or the dogs at home and parents, and there's no real option to have little friends. And I've heard some heart-wrenching little stories where the kids will like, choose like their animals or the toys in the house and decide that those are their friends. Like they're watching on TV and things present a very different sort of social world than what they're experiencing. And as someone who grew up pretty solitary, I can completely relate to that. I mean, I remember setting up my Star Wars figures and like willing them to come to life so I would actually have friends when I was really tiny. So I
Oh,
think that, yeah, like I was raised by a bunch of senior citizens in a rural area. There was like, there was nobody else my age around. So like I can relate to like I don't think it'll harm them. I mean, for me, it led to uh, just a really rich imagination. I found ways to amuse myself. I found ways to create my own, social interactions through stories. I read widely. So, and also with so many things going online, I think there's a lot more option, at least to have virtual interactions.
yes.
But even that changes the way that we think of interactions. We don't learn as much body language maybe. And we're going to focus a little bit more on like just what can you see, what can you hear from someone. So I think it'll change. I do think there's, a certain amount of stress and a certain amount of, potential trauma that can come out of that. And we need to move into the future with an eye toward that trauma. But on a wider sense, like there is just enough trauma to go around for everybody. We are going through a time period that is extraordinary. Not a single one of us prepared in our lives for this. We did not expect something like this to happen. And there's there is a level of grinding psychic damage, long, slow, long-term damage that happens when you're in a crisis state 24/7. Like we're not put together as beings psychologically to have a catastrophe that lasts for a year, for more than a year, where there's an incomprehensible number of deaths per day.
It's it's just beyond it's beyond daunting. It's like foreboding when you think about when you truly think about it, and and people that have friends are in places like because I'm in Houston, Texas, and we've definitely got it here too. But in places like New York, and I really feel for people that have gotten really bad in New York, um, and I've known some people that's gone to the hospital now. Now, as you know, my father passed away from COVID just recently, but I was in Dubai, And so that was amazing. Like across the world, he's like several hours ahead. And for a while I thought it'd be okay, but it hit him, and I'm just like, it was so sudden, that it was beyond belief,
Mhm.
when that happened. But I am thankful that I mean he had so many of us. There's about like 9 of us, siblings from him, spread across the world. I think he was trying to build an army, you know,
Yeah,
and he
that's
really was. And but we're spread across the world, and so we're using social media to share photos and pictures of him after he passed to try to like ease that transition,
mm,
and also in a way become stronger siblings in the process. So that's the only good thing that came from his passing is that he brought all his children together.
mm. Look,
So
it raises a good question. I know it's something so many people have wrestled with. How do you mourn? How do you deal with end of life stuff in a time when you may not be able to be present with the person at their bedside at all? Like we're social animals, and there's just this. I think most everyone, if you ask them like, if you die, what's your worst fear? Most people are going to say, I don't want to die alone. And so there's this simultaneously the fear of the person who may be passing away, but also the sense of responsibility for friends and family to want to be there and to have that denied and finding ways to try to get around that. Uh, like your story, I've heard a lot of people where the family members and the friends, because they are forced to find a different way to communicate, they do so with so much more intention that they are woven together more tightly, despite the fact that they may not be able to be in the same room.
right,
Uh,
it's it's strange how like there were years of things that no one had said, and then when this has happened, it's like everything rose to the surface. So I not just in my family and I think of my father, but close friends of mine. I do a lot of emotional support system building with colleagues of mine that sort of spread that message. There was my friend Emily Carmen. She has her own podcast, Ellis of the Painters, and I've been on there so many times, and the recurring thing has been like, what's wrong with the world? Like, what's going on?
mhm,
And so we created this thing called like hashtag supportive culture and hashtag supportive society, because
mhm,
in some ways, uh, council culture has its pluses, because if someone's doing horrible things, then they have to be taken out of a position of power because they're corrupting the sense of
mhm,
everything. But in some ways, you it's like it also leaves almost like a residue because people forget that they can talk about the people that are doing great things that don't
yeah,
have clout or notoriety, but maybe they're a janitor, maybe they're a cook or something, but they have 2 jobs and they use extra funds to feed the homeless, something like that, or they're in need to help their community, things like that. So there's like amazing people that are doing these wondrous things that just can't get out there. So supportive society and supportive culture are basically trying to elevate people, kind of like I mentioned earlier, and build them up. And so
yeah,
the more positivity you put in, it's almost like cooking. The more spice you add to the meal, the right kind of spice and the right
mhm,
uh, collective ingredients, you have something that's really beautiful. You have like just one ingredient, 2 ingredients, it becomes bland. So I think the world is made of people of diverse backgrounds, diverse ethnicities, cultures, ages, people that can really bring something to the table. And I think now that we're all sort of like at some point in time, because of the pandemic, we're all suffering a little bit in different ways. Some of us more, some of us less. But I think now is a good time, sort of, to bring people uh, up to a higher level to elevate them. Because there's people that can guide younger generations. There's people that of the same age, but just aren't seen. So I'm all about just really bringing people up. There's some people that write me, and you probably experienced too, especially you more
Mm.
than anybody, where they write you and you write back and they're surprised because they
Yeah.
think, oh, you're so busy. They're like, well, why would you talk to me? It's like, because you're a human being that took the time to contact me, and we love the same things. And so that should be like the status quo, that we're all equals, we're all human beings instead of like the divide of hierarchy. I'm not about hierarchy.
No,
In the
that's same.
in the vampire community, I'm just Tarik. I don't want
Yeah.
any title. That's how I feel pure that way. I feel I can be myself. The same reason why I prefer to be non-binary, because I feel that the whole sense of what's happened to the labeling of male or female or whatever, and like what that is to people depends on what year it is. It's subjective to the generation, and that's like that shouldn't be. It should be subjective to the person, like wherever they want to
Yeah.
be. I actually took a survey. I'll say this real quick. Sorry, I'm just like
Oh
rambling.
no,
uh,
I was just I fidget all the time. Don't take anything by it.
uh, let's go. I took a survey, and it was like Norway, and in some ways they do some great things there for some things. And they said for school, especially elementary, there's some programs where they call the children by their names. They don't say little girl, little boy. They just say like, hey Tony, hey whatever your name is, and they have the children decide in their own time what they want to be called.
Hmm.
And so they give them like just like a equal balance, get all the resources to them, and they'll let them decide on their own. I thought, and the survey says, do you think that our generation could have benefited from that? I was like, I'm sure we could have.
Mm-hmm.
You think that every generation that's alive right now would accept it? I said, I think there'll be some resistance in some of the older generation because it's been so instilled for so long. And there'd be some exceptions, of course, but overall, I think that the younger generation moving forward from COVID, I think that in a weird sense, the pain, the emotional turmoil of all this stuff would sort of force people to kind of speak up about what they're going through. And then these emotions that come up, and we get to genders, and the guys are like, well, is it okay if I should cry? I mean, my father just died, or my mom has suffered, this kind of stuff. It's like crying is cathartic, yelling, all emotions are beautiful in their own way. So I
I
think
mean,
we should celebrate that.
personally, I think it's braver to be able to cry. I have a hard time crying in front of people. I internalized a lot of very masculine uh, stereotypes from our society. So,
Right.
like, if you can cry, to me, that's braver than just sitting there and like trying to tough it out. Uh, we've got another good question. What were our personal favorite coping strategies that got us through the past year or so? Uh, what have you been doing to cope? I know I've been remodeling my house. I mean, obviously not just myself. We're in the position where we had a friend who worked in healthcare. He was head of security at a hospital, and the job was kind of already killing him before COVID. But
Oh my goodness.
he was like super high risk. His blood pressure was all over the place. We needed a bunch of like house stuff done, and so we were like, all right, we'll pay you to quit that job so that you are part of our pod so that we can basically quarantine together and make sure that everybody's safe. We could pay somebody else to do this, but we can't guarantee where they're going and what they're coming into contact with. And so we'll provide, equal pay for this if you are here to do these wonderful bookshelves that are behind me and then like do all the other stuff. So we've been nesting mostly. And like the idea, like if I'm going to be in this house for almost 24/7, every day, day in, day out with no travel, I might as well really, really like it. So
Right.
giving myself permission to indulge in a few things, like really fancy bookshelves.
Oh yeah, I can see that collection of books right there. I see the Sandman. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, impeccable taste.
Yeah, this is the gaming room. So all the Vampire the Masquerade, all the Dungeons and Dragons, all the
Yes.
uh, graphic novels, my original copy of The Crow, and all of the stuff that shows that I'm a geek from the 80s and 90s.
I love The Crow. The Crow is my favorite movie of all time. All
Mm.
time. My God, Brendan Lee,
Hmm.
he stole the show with that movie. I mean,
Actually,
it's so
today was his
sad.
birthday.
What, today?
Yeah, today's his birthday, February 1st.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Synchronicity for sure for that. Oh, happy birthday,
Yeah,
Brendan.
happy birthday.
Wow,
We remember you. Heck of a
definitely.
performance to go out on.
Oh man, that was like the performance.
Yeah.
It was the performance, you know. And Alex Croyce, the director of The Crow, also directed Dark City, which is my second favorite movie. It was like back to back.
Doesn't get as much attention, but it was
I
such a
know.
good movie, and the aesthetic was awesome. The sound was awesome.
I,
I
I, I
love.
even took a sample of one of part of the movie and put it in my music.
Hmm.
Yeah, I had
So,
to celebrate that one.
I mean, for you, I know you've been making music. You've been. I remember you getting tapped to be a spokesperson for a couple of things. So, like, you've been keeping yourself busy. What creative stuff has gotten you through?
Just like you mentioned, being a spokesperson, so social blue and being disabled. I have, in case some of you don't know exactly, I have myasthenia gravis, and myasthenia gravis is like, uh, it's something that some of us are born with, some of it just like just happen over time, that your immune system starts becoming sort of wonky, you know, and instead of your electrical impulses moving to the right sort of way, it starts almost coating the area muscle from it, and it starts to degrade the impulse. So the more I use the muscle, the less I can use that muscle. So I'm outside the house. I have to use a wheelchair, and I still model, and somehow I can't remember how it even happened, but Social Blue sort of came up, and I saw a lot of work they're doing. It's like, oh, you guys are awesome, you know. And they wanted me to be their spokesperson, so I became like their disabled model spokesperson. And it turns out, like that, even though I have a physical disability, the social blue talks about like emotional issues, because a lot of people don't. People that have it will feel it, but some people that don't have deep depression or high anxiety, um, or they're bipolar or something like that, you know, manic depressive, like these things are more of a mental struggle, just like have a physical struggle. I think that's equal, and so the app came for everybody that has some type of like daily thing that they're working on. You know, just like I mentioned there. So that became all inclusive, and then the pandemic happened, and it
Yeah.
was like pretty much open. The app became open to everybody because I think everyone is really suffering. The
Yeah.
statistics I think are kind of skewing because they were saying originally it's like 1 out of 5 people have a mental illness. You know, depression is a mental illness. You know, and then with the pandemic, they go 1 out of 4 people. You
Hmm.
know, but then they say over 50%, like 60 people at some point within between 2020 and 2021 so far have some level or some moment of having mental illness or some type of you know event.
Well,
Uh,
depression, the isolation. I mean, I'm an introvert, and I think both of us have some physical. For me, nothing like what you have in terms of limitations, but those things do mean that at least I tend to be more a homebody. Like I'm comfortable at home where I control the environment. So you'd think that I was all set up to be isolated during a pandemic,
hmm.
but even as a hard introvert, as somebody who just, if I were given my druthers on any other time, and you asked me, would you rather travel or would you rather sit at home in a chair with a good book? It's always going to be sit at home. But even so, take having the option taken away, like,
Yeah.
even if I wouldn't take that option, having that option taken away, there's a point where, like, something in your brain starts to feel a little trapped. And I've seen it in, especially friends who are a little bit more extroverted than me. The idea of, even though, like, rationally they understand that it is safer to stay home, it's safer to limit their contact, there's still that, "But I want to do this, but this is my normal way of doing things, but this is the way that I," and just the frustration and the fact that this is a barrier, and a barrier that they hadn't been expecting and they weren't prepared for. I've watched that really pick at a lot of people's psychic and emotional well-being. Do you feel like disabled people have been forgotten about during the pandemic,
I just saw
or
that.
looked over, swept under the rug? Like,
I personally feel it's surreal because I think people are getting like a small glimpse of what it's like to be disabled.
hmm
Because since people can't go anywhere or not as much, and there's a sense of being so claustrophobic, so I had to take like an immune suppressing medicine. And so in general, I have to be careful around people with a code or something. So now it's like extreme. Like I can't really go anywhere,
yeah.
especially unless it's like I have to go to hospital for like a procedure or see a doctor or something like that. But if I don't have to go anywhere, I don't go anywhere. And so people are starting to share that experience on a global scale. So this is a glimpse of what it's like to be disabled, But in terms of people who actually are disabled and have been for a while, I think that the only good thing is, like I say, social media is more accessible because everyone's using it now. So we're able to communicate more with people I haven't seen. I've been talking recently to people I haven't seen in like 2 or 3 years,
hmm
at least 3 years, not in person, but using things like this, But I definitely think that to some degree we do feel a little underappreciated, you know. There was I was talking to another host of a show a while back, and they mentioned fast fashion, because like the couture fashion and things like nature. So fast fashion is like whenever you have like a company that's like a corporate company and they mass produce a line of clothing, but it's only really good for like 2 weeks, and they promote it like that for 2 weeks, and then maybe have like someone like Kim Kardashian or someone that's really famous wear it. They pay them to wear it, so not everyone wants to wear it or something, right? And then that week goes away, and instead of like the people that bought those clothes giving it to like Goodwill or secondhand to give it to a friend, a lot of times they just throw it away, and it becomes like there's a landfill. There's so much in the landfills of clothing that's just like extra clothing people just tossed away. Now you're thinking
So
about it.
just totally disposable, like serious disposable culture. Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, when you look into people, the fashion for those that are disabled, and we would, it's hard for us to find clothing that makes us feel comfortable. All the stuff I wear is custom. One, because I like fashion, but I literally have to make it work for me, or else my circulation gets cut off, or something's too tight. It messes with my digestion or something like that,
hmm
anything like that. So when we find something that works for us, we like hold on to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if we wouldn't throw it away, But a lot of fashion isn't made for us. It's made for people that or the mass consumer, or are in for the trend. And we're in it for the long haul. We're in it for practicality, and like someone like me might just customize it to make it look a bit more aesthetic. But we went practical first,
Well, yeah,
and
you want
so
something that can work around mobility devices or prosthesis, but why does it have to look bad? Like, why does it have to be utilitarian just because you also have to work with that stuff? Like, and there does, I know in the past there definitely seemed to be the attitude of like, well, you get what you get, and that just seems awful. One good side I've seen with the pandemic is there has been a lot more discussion about accessibility, since so many of us have to now. Like,
right,
it used to be like geek culture, the vampire community, goth culture, like so many things revolved around conventions and club nights and going out and traveling to places. And you didn't necessarily think about the privilege of both being financially secure enough and physically or psychologically able enough to travel to something like that and participate in the community. And now that that step has sort of been taken away from everybody, now we're like, well, we can do this and we can do it virtually. And look at all the new voices that have come forward that we didn't realize we were excluding. Folks who, like, it just simply wasn't feasible to travel if they were wheelchair bound. It wasn't simply feasible to travel if they had like very severe, mental disabilities to try to work around with. But everybody can kind of come together with Zoom and whatnot in their living room and have a certain level of comfort zone and be able to
exactly.
control that a little bit more. Why is a device more expensive just because it has a medical label? That would be a great thing to know. It's a little bit like textbooks. Like if it's a college textbook, it's going to be $300. Same, but like you can have a book published through Create Space and it costs like $4 wholesale.
Exactly. It's insane. Oh yeah, Carl.
Yeah. What do y'all
Oh,
think about the?
I was actually about to bring it up. Yeah, he wrote me earlier,
Yeah.
and like he wrote a question earlier. Thank you, Carl.
Hmm.
So what I was thinking was in terms of energy flow with people, like this day and age, like you do have to like uh, in a universe like attracts like, you know. So if you're a positive thinker, a good person, I think it's only natural for you to find others that speak the same language, so to speak. But sometimes when you're a good person, and it's not a bad thing to give people a chance. Sometimes every once in a while, we give the wrong people a chance, and they start stripping away our energy and just who we are. And sometimes part of them can rub off on us. So in terms of how to associate, I think first associate with the right people, so you don't lose an exorbitant amount of energy. You know, because normally the right kind of people will actually give you energy. You know, just like this conversation here, I feel even though my energy normally wanes throughout the day, I feel like a sense of flow and rhythm because there's endorphins, there's good positive energy. It's stimulating certain aspects of my mind right now in this conversation. So I'm actually building more energy than losing. But in a stressful situation, when people are breaking someone down for whatever reason, whether they're a bully because they were being picked on, and then they're trying to spread that onto others subconsciously, not even realizing. I think that if you can remove yourself from that position and go back to people that you know that are your anchors, the people that have proven to be trustworthy, and have them help build you back up, you know, and do the same for them.
Well,
And
and I,
also, go ahead. I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Oh,
No,
no,
go ahead.
well, and I
Please.
know because of the isolation with the pandemic, that questions come up of if you're someone who relies on like physical interaction, face-to-face interaction with others, either get energy or to give energy to offload some of your excess, and you find yourself isolated, what do you do? I've had a lot of folks who are, psychic practitioners, empaths, vampires over the past year reach out and ask, like, how do I manage this? Uh, how do I feed? How do I get rid of all this excess energy if I have no option to be with another person? When the way that I know how to do that is either with touch or at least in person, and falling back on techniques that are a little bit more difficult. In Reiki and a lot of energy healing techniques, there is the idea of long distance energy work,
Yes.
but it's usually taught as a more advanced technique. And it takes a little bit of both, I don't know, imagination and trust to wrap your head around the fact that we might be hundreds of miles apart. I know from a fact, because my mom used to live in Texas, that it is more than 24 hours constant driving to get from where I'm at to where you're at. It will take me a full day if I don't stop. Probably, yeah, anyway. So that much space between us.
Right.
But I can feel your energy, and
I
and
can feel
your
you
your
too.
image here and our voices here are good touchstones, are good focal points
Yes.
to kind of beam in on this and let our brains bridge the gap that our spirits don't recognize in the first place. Like we're all connected, and we just the physical distance is kind of illusory, really, when it comes down to it. It's just you got to trick yourself into realizing that.
Exactly. I mean, it was interesting. Like, I'm not reading your thoughts. You know, I'm not
Mm,
invading anything, but I can sense your intellect and how there's some things that correlate with mine. And so, by process of elimination, and hypothetically speaking, you're probably familiar with like, you know, in terms of the hadron collider and how they're taking a proton and they're trying to have it pop up in another location. And so, in a lot of ways, um, they've definitely had success in large objects, but you know, minute, tiny like protons shown in one area, identical to its predecessor. So that in theory, teleportation uh, should be possible in the future with the right type of energy source and technology. But in theory, it should work. You know, but psychically speaking, we have less limitations
Hmm.
because the mind doesn't have to follow the same rules as the body. I think that because the mind is so complex, and the neural pathways are pure energy. When you think about pure energy in a sense, and how it can mimic certain vibrational fields once it matches someone else's, especially if there's an emotional component that connects those two people together. And the more neural pathways and more great experiences they have, the stronger that connection is. So even though you're totally right, it is normally pretty advanced. But I think if people give it more of a chance, I think they can find some satisfaction even from a distance in terms of
I
energy
know
transference.
one of the things that I've been trying to do to help folks kind of bridge that gap is, I run House Kepru, and that's membership based, but we also have a Discord that is, anybody who's just interested in stuff. So I don't know, there's about 300 people on there, and I started sometime in March last year doing a connection ritual every Saturday. And now to call it a ritual makes it sound a lot more fancy than it is. It's literally like a 10 to 15 minute guided imagery moment where we take a few moments and all of us collectively first find our center, our spark, whatever we see our core self as, and then we follow all of those thousands of tiny little filament connections, the vast glimmering web work, enduring and undying, that connects all of us.
Yeah,
And we just spend some time being aware of how connected we all are, no matter how distant we are. And then people invite, if they feel like they need energy, I encourage them to kind of like send out a request, and if they feel that they've got enough to share, to send out the like, I've here, and just sort of like send it out along those lines, and let it be a consensual reciprocal relationship. So I guess to go back to like how to cope, helping people do that every week and helping folks learn how to do long distance energy work and kind of conceptualize that has been a significant part of how I've felt better about having to be so isolated.
yeah. This period of time is really like caused everyone to dig so deep into who we are, and so those connections with people, like you're saying, those connections become even so much more important. Your emotion support system, your magical support system, in terms of empathy. Everyone that's, whether they're a vampire or witch, um, anyone that's like sort of outside the box and has high perception,
Hmm.
that perception vibrates at such a high level. I think we're more in tune of the beauty of the world and also the pain of the world. But that pain can unite us. I think so that people would just sort of gravitate to those that truly care about them. Um, I think getting through this, some of us can actually get out this stronger than before. Even though it's sort of like strange because it's like not knowing how long this thing will last or if
Yeah,
it would never go away.
yeah.
That's always a possibility too. But I try not to dwell on that. I actually know what's strange about that is that I actually had a dream
Mm.
in terms of psychic impressions. The bigger the event, as you know, the bigger the ripple psychically. And so it was like 3 years ago. I had a dream. I was in a house with green walls, just color green,
Mm.
and it was this place. And I'd never seen this part of the house before, before that dream. And so it was house with green walls, and then I looked downstairs, and it was like outside across the street in the dream. There were people running to ATMs and pulling their money out ATMs and putting plastic around it, make sure it was hermetically sealed.
Hmm.
I was like, that's really crazy, and it was like, people were rioting in the streets and all crazy stuff. So later on, I'm like, yeah, so this time of age, this is a landmark, because now
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
here, you know,
yeah. No, I know
like,
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, because I have things like that.
exactly. They have to have a visual component to make it sort of make sense. And then the plastic, have everything has to be covered in plastic, sanitized, and then money becomes precious because you don't know how long you're going to have it for. Because the economical system is in dire straits, and it's trying not to collapse itself. So all of those three main things. And actually, a fourth thing was that I was around some people that had a sense of like uncertainty.
Mhm.
That sense of uncertainty, and so and that's how the whole world feels right now. So I think right there was like a glimpse to the future. Now since it's happened, I have another dream of something worse happening. So hopefully this is the worst of the gets. So we'll see.
Yeah, we just got done. Pagans do Imbolc around this time of year, and in House Kheperu we do Night of Shades, which is where we communicate with our disembodied. So the,
I like that.
so we believe we're spiritual immortals. We go from lifetime to lifetime, yada yada yada, which means also sometimes we're also not in bodies, and so we acknowledge those of our family who are connected to us, who just are between lives. And some years it's their opportunity to communicate with us. And some years they're like really insistent. There's like warnings. There's all this like, we need to talk to you about like what's going on in the world. And this year it didn't come with anything like that. Like when they communicated, it was, I want you to eat something sweet and help me remember what it feels like touch something luxurious, like remind yourself and also let me vicariously enjoy through you the things that you love about being alive.
Yeah,
And it was a really useful, it was twofold. It didn't, it was heartening to feel like there weren't more dire warnings. It was sort of like there's things are bad enough, you don't need any more warnings for what's going to go on. And while you're in the middle of this, don't forget that you are alive,
yeah,
that
exactly.
there are still things that you can take as luxuries, and those tiny luxuries now are precious. Don't overlook them. Don't focus only on the fact that the world is uncertain and there's wars and coups and contagion and all of this stuff pressing down on you and financial insecurity. Also, you have chocolate. Eat that stuff. It's fun. If there's somebody you can touch and kiss, that's
Yeah,
what you have lips for. Like, that's why you have a body. Like, there's all these cool things it can do. Even though sometimes it also means that it hurts. It means also it feels.
I just said that yesterday about the hurt part. Like it's crazy you said that. Like about sensation. It's like I said that when something hurts in a new way that has never hurt before physically, even though that hurts, it makes you feel like you're alive for a moment. It's like, oh, that's a new sensation. It's something that's a
Mm.
new experience. So even that little bit of pain is still in a weird way a good thing. It's still something to appreciate. It's weird, but
If you live with chronic pain, it's not weird at all. Like, it's one of those things that you're like, okay, well, that's new. That's a thing. From Curly Carl again. I also have another question. What do you think the next 4 years hold in store for us as a society? Yikes. I get a lot of requests because of my work as a psychic to like prognosticate, like, what do you see for the future? And I always hesitate to make definitive statements for a couple of reasons. One, because people see me on TV as a psychic. I think my words sometimes hold more weight than they should. Because I could be wrong. I might have visions of the future and I might have dreams that come true, but I am still interpreting those, and I could be
right.
wrong in my interpretation. I if you ask me, I don't know that I'm comfortable saying like what the next 4 years look like, but I think the next year uh, looks like, unfortunately, like the next 6 months is going to be a lot of the more of the same as we sort of try to figure out how to handle like what's going on with COVID, as we manage stuff with uh, the vaccinations and like make sure that that actually works, and find out like the logistics of how do you roll out something for so many people and who gets what. Like we're not doing a very good job of being organized with that right now.
Yeah.
So i think it's I think it's going to be tough because we know that we have a vaccination now. So I think a lot of people think that that means, oh good, it's there's the light at the end of the tunnel and that's going to be next month. And I don't think it's going to be next month. I think people are going to get really the people who might have been hanging on emotionally may find it much more difficult going in the next 4 to 6 months because it's not over yet.
Right.
We have a chance for it. Like, we know that it's getting there, but it's not going to be as quick as we'd like it to be. And that's just logistics, unfortunately. Like, it's
Um, yeah, another part of that too is like what I mentioned earlier about how like domestic violence escalates in stressful situations, and this is like probably the most stress people have seen in I don't know how long.
mhm,
So yeah, it's that's really sad, and I'm hoping that more programs will develop for people that are surviving a situation and are trying to seek help. So like more outlines for people to
mhm,
voice their emotions, and also government assistance, and then and small government too within the cities too. Because sometimes you can't always wait for like the top of the government to help out people, because it's just a paper trail that just takes forever, all the red tape and all that kind of stuff. That's actually, as you mentioned, about your house, which is beautiful work you all are doing there. And some of the things that we've kind of done for ourselves is that we've, we definitely are open to outside resources, but internally, we do like little fundraisers for ourselves. We would trade, whether it be like food or clothing, or
mhm.
create like an emergency fund. We try to like do little donations together. So if someone can't pay their electricity, or their rent is in jeopardy, and they're like, oh my god, I lost my job, or lost enough too many hours of my job, I can't afford this. We try our best to actually accommodate that person for that moment within reason. We're not rich ourselves, but when enough people work together, you can accomplish help something like that in that situation. So I'm definitely encouraging people to work together as a unit, as a group,
Mhm.
in this type of situation, and then through that, it helps us kind of like get through these rough patches. So because individually, it's much more difficult.
Well, that's actually something that I always loved about the vampire community. It was one of the values that like really stood out to me, and why it was a community that like held my heart even more than my theological convictions. Was we were like the outsiders among the outsiders, like the occultists, the witches and
Yeah.
Wiccans. Like, nobody wanted anything to do with us. They either thought that we were like super extreme weird, or we were actually just delusional. And in either way, especially in the 80s and 90s, we were pariahs for the magical subcultures, which meant that we had to hang together.
Right.
And that that evolved into like these little houses and courts, like these little found family units, and folks would stick together and support one another. Uh, in the 80s, we were very much fed this idea of the nuclear family, and family was blood. It was a mom and dad and 2.5 kids, and maybe a dog. And then like you couldn't have family who wasn't that. But those of us who didn't have that, we found each other, and we discovered the value of supporting one another, of sharing households together, of sharing emotional support together, financial support together. Not quite, I think, to the level of like, my parents, my mom's like, hippie commune kind of concept, but a more workable, like urban
Right.
community. And that everything I learned about how that works, and everything I value about how that worked, has served me really well during the pandemic. And it's given me a lot of advice that I've given to other people about like, find your community, find that little, we came up with the word the pods. Like people started to create their pods of who was their trusted, not just their physical household, but like those two or three other folks who they could trust were being just as careful as them. Um, so find your pod. I don't know if I'm thrilled with the word pod for it, but find your tribe of people and support one another, like earnestly, in ways that are more than just, you share a roof over your head. Like, make plans for if somebody can't work anymore, or if, one of them is working a job that is just too high risk, how can you all support them so that they can stop the high risk job but still support themselves, still find some way for all of it to work? Don't be afraid to like share food and share your budget together, and just be honest with one another about where you're at. Just, I don't know, redefine family. I think that one of the things that will carry any of us forward in the next, in everything that's coming in the next years, is have a tight knit group that you can rely on and whom you trust.
Yeah.
There was a
Exactly.
question that I totally missed because I was off on a tear.
I'm trying to find
There we
it
go.
too.
Family is what you create, not just what you share blood with. Yes.
That's so true. Um, and our pets are like extended family too. Our little pets, our fur babies.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have dogs and cats here, and like which that's always cool, but it became much more relevant to that whenever I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, and I was like, the week I still have a lot of weakness, but when it first hit me, it was unbearable. Like
Mm.
and I was coming home from the hospital, and my wife was helping me up the stairs really slowly, and I was like, how the hell am I get up these damn stairs? Like
Yeah.
uh, Maymay, one of our dogs, was like it's a tiny dog, and she's like a Chinese Crescent mixed Yorkie, half Yorkie, and she would go up each step and look at me like that and see if I was okay, and each step and looking like that, like
Oh,
yeah, it was like oh, thank you, and she's like all in her own thing, but that day she was like all about like, are you okay? Like something's wrong, and the dogs, pets know, they're
yeah,
very
they
attuned,
totally do.
they totally do, and so and most days, like I said, I can't get out much, so I have like Maisie here, May May, we call her a lot of times, or Rex, and Rex is even smaller. Sometimes you didn't know he's there because he's like blends into blankets and stuff. But the little companion, these little like familiars, so to speak, in a
Yeah.
way where they feel like they're your spirit, which is connected to them. And the thing is, um, whenever my father was struggling before he passed the COVID, and I was like, of course, like a shamble, I was shambles,
Mm.
going through stuff, and Rex wasn't sleeping right. He kept like coughing and looking at me and stuff like that. Like he was like pulling. Unfortunately, he was pulling some of the stress on me, and I was trying to like, no, I don't want you to get that, But he was like worried, So this to show that connection that pets have with us, is something to behold. Which reminds me, you said earlier today is it's a great Brendan Lee's birthday. Today is also the anniversary passing of a pet. A friend of mine, Ariana, mentioned to me today. She goes, if you can, say hello to Nanook. Nanook was her dog that passed, and
Oh,
Nanook uh, passed a year ago today. So we're saying hello to Nanook, and we love you. You know,
they
so
all
I'd
have
like to say
special places in our hearts.
definitely, most definitely.
Victoria says, I often see psychics, spiritualists searching for their own tribe, so to speak. As an energy worker, it's so hard to find one that feels genuine, let alone one of which you can speak from the heart. It's true. Well, and because I mean, group
Hmm.
dynamics are difficult, and I've had the privilege of being a speaker invited to present at pagan conventions and whatnot. And at one point, I was in sort of like the green room with uh, oh, Selena Fox, and basically like all of these big name founders. Like they live on my bookshelves, uh, movers and shakers in the pagan community, and we were just sort of talking shop. About stuff, and here I am. I've got my little group, but it had only been around at that point, like maybe I don't know, 8 years or so, maybe a little bit more, but it felt teeny tiny compared to, you know, the folks who had founded things in the 70s or in the 80s. And the conversation turned to the life cycle of groups. And this is important about, it's something I would have liked to have known when I started a group, but unfortunately I kind of like learned it along the way, which is you're going to screw up. And the hardest part about keeping a group together is surviving the drama that happens among people. It's you're going to
Yeah.
have drama. People are going to have hookups and makeups and breakups, and that's just a normal part of people. Like you add people to anything, and that's going to happen. And it's not about avoiding the fact that like, person A and person B hooked up and had a messy breakup. It's about how do you survive that? How do you communicate about it? How does the group as a whole like ferry itself emotionally through that? Are you willing to have hard conversations with one another? I'm polyamorous as well, and a lot of stuff I've learned from polyamory, also is appropriate for group dynamics, not the relationship part of it, but recognizing a friendship is also a relationship and it must be tended.
Sure.
And when you have a tight knit group, like you are all relating and you all need to have open communication. And a group survives or dies based on how you are able as mature adults to weather those difficult emotional moments. If you ignore them or try to like just shut them down, that's when things are going to fall apart.
That's so true. That's so true. Whether like I'm into a lot of different cultures and subcultures, and whether it be the vampire community or psychic ability awareness communities, or in terms of spirituality in general, people that just work on meditation, things like nature, like a lot of things like that seem to be synonymous to all these groups, is that we we all want to be seen for who we are
Hmm.
and have like a open space to kind of like nurture that to grow. I think that just like you said, like I'm trying to find another word too to call it like a little pod, but
Yeah.
but
Eh.
but you
Well,
gotta
and I don't
find
want to call tribe because that feels maybe a little appropriative. Like I want to be
right.
respectful of the use of certain languages. Troop,
Uh,
but then I feel like I need to be like, there's magic to do and to say.
yeah, we definitely have our little collective groups and stuff like that. But I think in this day and age, it's giving people an opportunity because whenever there's necessity is the mother of invention. So people have this need to express themselves now more than usual. Like some people might close themselves off because it might be too much for them, and some people will try to express themselves before they close off, knowing that they have to open up before they start to implode within themselves. And so seeking like artistic, creative ways to connect with people, I'm always encouraging that. And even I used to teach meditation um, in small classes before all this stuff, a little bit. And we did this thing where people would meditate, and right after you meditate, we'll paint. While you still have that emotion, you start painting
Oh, cool.
watercolor and fill it. So cool. It was so fluid. And then I'm asking people questions about like what they're painting. Like, what are you painting? It's like, I don't know what I'm painting, but I like it, man. It's like they're just like flowing in it. It's like, okay, do that, do your thing, then. I'm like, okay, cool. But it's like it's just great to see people to find themselves whenever you think that the odds are against you, and yet you still find yourself and you still
Hmm.
excel. I think that's like the true strength. I think that is. But a lot of times that's found by the complement energy of others.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, when I was growing up, I was a lot of people don't know this. When I was growing up, when I was a kid, I would speak, but I was if I was spoken to, and it's only by certain people. And most of the time, I was so close off, I was practically like catatonic. I was like very traumatized. And I was all introverted, all internalizing beyond the standard sense of the word. It was like the um, the true definition that I was like just
Hmm.
fully like closed off. And so I didn't get more open in terms of speaking to people. Actually, speaking came third. It was like martial arts, and I still didn't talk that much, but I used to have martial arts. And when I got into dance, and dance, like I didn't even think because I was so afraid to dance, I was so dumbfounded. I was like, how did this even happen? And I started loving dance, and when I started to dance, and then start talking more, start opening it up and getting more into back to my arts and stuff like that. So, but that was through the help of someone else. That was like a dance teacher,
Hmm.
So people sort of lending part of themselves to someone else to kind of like sort of passing the torch to another person. So I'm just encouraging people. We can't all be in physical in person, unfortunately, but through social media, through like chats and forums, like like the group uh, co-founded years back, we constantly every day are just checking on how you doing, what's going on, did you sleep well, and things. This saying that you care about somebody, and they're you set a time and date to kind of really talk to them with if something's really going well, so you have a longer period of time to speak to them. Taking time off or something like that, we have nothing to gain, is
Mm-hmm.
huge. That's huge because a lot of times people have been hurt and always like, oh well, you're probably just trying to, you just need something from me, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what's in it for you? Like it's this cynicism starts spreading. But I think that they're generally great people when you give people a chance. And if you, I was telling my wife Liz the other day, like if you didn't see me, like I don't know, like uh, would this be the person you think has his voice? And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of times society has subconsciously, like a lot of us have, we all have to some degree, expectations and preconceived notions. But when you give people just a little bit of chance, then you just be surprised, and then the whole world opens up. And sometimes opportunities also open up for you as well. Like if you're in dire straits, you're like man, and you're just like sort of venting to someone. If that person cares about you and say, hey, well now that you mention it, I know someone that might help you with this. It's like the sort of opening,
Mm-hmm.
So the people that are most successful, um, there are some exceptions, of course, but for the most part, the people that are most successful are the people that communicate, talk with their hands,
Yeah.
that connect with other people. I really see that Elon Musk attempts this, and he has like a certain level of Asperger's, and he still tries to power through. He still tries to communicate, and we have a certain type of intellect that's more in the sense of factual instead of like creative, and still tries to become creative. And I respect people that try to go against that and try to find another part of themselves to develop. Because I've never think as a small child or even preteens that I would be so personable with people. And I wish I could go back in time sometime to my younger self and tell that version of myself that it would be okay and to give people a chance.
Yeah, similarly, if you'd told younger me that most of my job and work was going to be on TV and in front of people and talking in front of people, talking in front of like, thousands of people in some cases, it completely unthinkable to me. You lost your father recently. My aunt Kathy died last week, and
Oh,
she
I'm
was a
so
New York
sorry.
fashion model, cover of Cosmo in the 70s. Like actually, like there was an article where like she's compared to Christy Brinkley at the time as up and coming. She was
Oh
like the
wow.
taboo girl. Um, Very, very successful at what she did, like very striking features. And I learned a lot about how to be in front of a camera and how to talk, and then just sort of like all of this stuff. Not that she like sat me down and taught me to be a model, but whenever we were around, like that was so much a part of who she was. And she would make it fun. She'd make it play. Like everything was always playing with cameras. So I owe a lot of how I am aware of how people perceive things, like even like the way that I'm inclined to hold my face because I can see the lighting catches the cheekbones just the right way, and that's an important thing. Like it
Yeah.
seems like a silly little thing, but it also helps. Like how you look is important. Like you are kind of putting on uh you put on a suit and a tie to go work a certain type of job. You also want to put on a certain amount of glamour, because that gets people to like, okay, who am I looking at? How am I talking to this person? You take some care with that. It doesn't. You don't have to look traditionally attractive. I mean, I don't think that I look traditionally. I'm certainly not a girly girl. Um, Never really have been. I look awful when I try, but to be aware of this is this is part of communication as well. How I dress, how I move, like what I put behind me, in this particular stuff, like being aware of that. And I don't know, I have no idea where I was going with that beyond solidarity for being actually incredibly shy and not necessarily someone who thought that this was going to be their job, and yet here we are.
How do you think that that came to be in terms of like, was it something that, in terms of who we are now, was this the opportunity unfolded, or you something just clicked and you turned on and you're like, okay, I need to do this? Like,
I know for me, I can tell you exactly like the day and the time. It was 1996. It was after the Susan Walsh disappearance, and it was when the vampire community was like seriously like under scrutiny. It was like leading up to stuff with like the West Memphis Three, and it became clear that somebody had to speak up. Somebody had put themselves in front of the camera. And at that point, if you like we all had scene names, like everybody was kind of operating underneath a pseudonym, partly for protection, and sometimes because you know, if you were married with kids, you didn't want your kids taken away. If you had family, you might not want to be outed because it would be bad for your family. I was at a place in my life where I didn't have anything like that to lose.
hmm,
And I was like, I can do this. I've got the background, I've got the academic chops to back up things that I'm going to say, and I don't see anybody else doing this. I guess this is what I'm going to do. It wasn't what I set out to make like my career, but it's what led to me being basically the activist and the media liaison for both the vampire and partly also the pagan and the goth community at the time. So when like 1999 happened and Columbine happened, I was the reasonable, like I was the fringe voice of like, you know, here's the goth person to talk about like, you know, these kids in black trench coats and how no, this is not what our community represents. And like,
hmm,
here's, you know, I can give you citations and I can sound like a college professor because that's really what I was planning to do with my life. And it was a calling, like it needed to be done and I didn't see anyone else doing it, so I was like, well, guess that's what I'm doing now.
that might have been the best way. It was almost like the balance of the universe, like when some type of moving force sort of like running down and start to create havoc, you know, an opposing force, in this case would be you, had to meet it and balance it out. So it's like it's, I think it might have been the best way. Sometimes when people have like um, sort of like a strange, I guess, a strange momentum for
Mm-hmm.
the wrong reason, then you know it's like for example, in the politics world, um, now there are some exceptions, but basically, genetically speaking, I think I might have mentioned this before actually, but genetically speaking, one out of three men have the supposed warrior gene. That's a weird phrase.
Mm-hmm.
The warrior gene, you know. And in politics, that's like the vast majority of people have that gene, and it's been shown through studies. But it's not necessarily a bad thing if someone has like a regiment, they have like a nurturing family, or even like just like a sort of a moral compass to sort of keep them, you know, in a certain rhythm. But if someone is fed the wrong, you know, nutrients emotionally, and it makes mistakes, and someone covers their tracks, they start building these bad habits because they're not
Mm.
checked. Then that person becomes like, well, anybody would be like, you know, sort of a bit of a tyrant in that situation, but especially people that should have been sort of regulated better. And so I think that even though genetics don't define us, I think that, you know, if someone doesn't put any work into balancing out any sort of like, you know, sort of asymmetrical part of their makeup, genetic makeup, then that's going to rule them. You know, if they don't try to
Mm-hmm.
like work against that. And so I think in our society, people don't voice their any. They have to always look strong, whatever that is. They don't express vulnerabilities as much, and because of that, things go unchecked.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm getting at is that uh, a lot of the root cause of this conversation, I think, is the pandemic. You know, this day and age, and so it's bringing things to the forefront. It's showing things have always been in place, but it's just it's sort of like it puts it under a microscope. You know,
It's
like you know,
just
it's
ripped any mask right off.
right off it. You
I
know, and
mean,
so
you know, there's that old sawhorse of, you know, those in power usually shouldn't be the ones who want to be. And I think that that's, you know, something that you're pointing at with that too, is our narratives about what a leader is and what a leader should be are a little toxic right now. That it's like this sort of like chest beating. It's about strength and it's about power and it's about being able to like. And I think leadership is more about service
Yeah.
and being in service to people. To you need to have the willpower to stand up in front of people and to advocate for people. That requires great courage, and sometimes that does require aggression, but you're doing that in service to a greater good. You're not being aggressive simply to be aggressive. You're
Right.
not speaking out simply to speak your truth or your desire. You are ideally listening and then representing what the greater good needs, and then using all of your power and your will and your courage to be a warrior for that. I think AOC is a great representation of that. She is ferocious, and man, do they hate her for it.
And that's the thing. You know, it's like if you know, it's like if that's like how people should be, then everybody should be allowed to have some sense of sternness and
Mm-hmm.
you know and power. But it's like a double standard, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so like you know that's the thing about it. But I think that there is a lot of progress, but there still should be more progress in terms of equality,
Yeah.
and definitely people in terms of power. Because that's what really changes things, you know. People, community leaders, government officials, things of that nature. Influencers, oddly enough, have like a lot of power, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like mega famous, but I'm somewhat
No,
known or something.
I think you definitely have it.
You know, I'm getting there. You know, and you start to have to have more responsibility when you do that. So I think about what I say. I think about what I say in general, but especially think about it and say, you know, when you have like you know so many people sort of tuning in or like watching your video or a post or
Mm-hmm.
something or like an interview or something. So what you say carries weight, especially if they respect you for a long time. There's been I'm still debating this. I'm still debating this. Like for example, like Johnny Depp, for example.
Mm-hmm.
He's a human being, and I don't know him personally. You know, I don't know through like the product lens of what I see on TV, but I can look in someone's eyes sometimes to see something. You know, and I see a total contrast of who he was before, who he is now. And when I think about his great moments like Edward Scissorhands and the amazing Vincent Price in that movie, and all these things that are affiliated with Tim Burton, all the things that are affiliated with Johnny Depp in his earlier movies, and I still love it. I never take away from that. I am concerned about the person he is today, and I know he's struggling in a lot of different ways, and the people around him sometimes might get the blunt of that, unfortunately. But he's a human being, and I'm not here to judge him. Uh, it definitely makes me feel a little strange inside. It's like, oh, I'm a little disappointed, but who am I to judge somebody? But going back, I'm kind of circling back to like what I was saying earlier, in about when people grow up and they're nurtured a certain way, whether people in politics or people that are have problems and are never corrected early on, the problem gets bigger later on. You know, like
Yeah.
um, if it's okay to do this, it's a little bit unorthodox. But like I do music, and sometimes if I can do like a quick acapella about the subject,
Mm.
it might make more sense. If that's okay.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm fine with that.
cool. Can you hear me okay still?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, here we go. Prepare myself. Look what you made me do. Look what you made me say, child. The soul slips away now. Look what you made me say. Look what you made me do. Look what you made me say, child. Your soul slips away now. Look what you made me say, oh no. It was you, it was me. All the time, it was you. Oh no, it was me. All the time. All the ones of you were the ones who laughed at me. All the ones of you were the ones who laughed at me. Almost over, trying to stay. Almost over, trying to stay. All the ones of you are the ones who laughed at me. All the ones of you are the ones who laughed at me. Almost over, trying to stay. Almost over, trying to stay away. Okay, so with that, for me, I wrote that a long time ago. What that means is
Mm. It's like
like
the twiningness of responsibility.
they keep struggling, like who's responsible for what. But if you go to the first part, it's like look what you make me do. Your soul slips away. That's domestic violence. Is someone hurting someone else that's close to them, blaming the other person for hurting them.
Mm.
Like it's your fault I'm hurting you. They're not taking ownership, right? And you go back into like they're struggling. They're starting to click into like who's really responsible. It's like, oh no, it's not you, it's me. And then you go back to like why did that happen in the first place? And as a
Mm-hmm.
person, as a child, it's like all the ones of you were the ones that laughed at me. He or she was being picked on for a long period of time, unchecked, on people supervising them, uh, didn't nurture them, saying like in this situation, like oh, like oh you're a good kid. These other kids are just picking on you for the wrong reasons, just because of their own insecurities. Don't listen to them. You're a strong kid. You're a great kid, and let me show you who that person is, so you can love yourself, right?
Mm.
A lot of people are parents, and some parents are great parents. Um, not every parent's perfect, but I'm sure they love the kid. Unfortunately, sometimes parents get swept away. Some parents get swept away in responsibilities financially. Well, I got to work 2 jobs, get food on the table. I don't have time to teach these kids. That type of thing. And so they put the ownership to the school system. Say, hey, here's my kid. Go to your principal or to your school counselor and get the help for them. The counselor's like, well, there's only so much I can do because I'm not your parent. Yeah,
Mm.
they don't take responsibility, and so this cake is passed around between responsibility, and then later on these bad habits they escalate. And like myself, I was lucky enough to seek help through martial arts, through dance, through art itself, and my mom she did work like 2 jobs, but she wasn't perfect, but she had great moments where she did sit me down and say, hey, this is what is best for a person to do in life. Um, and so I had these key moments of reminders. And my dad, he wasn't always around. And he did make a great deal of mistakes, but his mistakes I still learn from. I said, okay, don't do that because
Mm.
you see what happened to him. It's like he had a lot of mistakes that he had really fight against, and he had his own struggle. And then he had his great friends too because he brought himself to college. He worked. He was a self-made person. I was like, wow, I really respected that. I remember that. Being self-made and by your bootstraps, so to speak, and make something for yourself in life. And then my mom showed me the more emotional side of things through art, and she studied fine arts, interior design, and that came like a huge outlet for me. I think if I didn't have art as a kid, I'll be a totally different person.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I similarly, my mom was going to Kent State for both a double degree in art and music, and so I grew up. I had like this rocking horse, and she would play the William Tell Overture on her violin, and I just I remember just music and art being the first 5 years of my life, in between that and all the times in the hospital. And
wow.
yeah, I think that it had a huge impact like that. Those things stuck with me, and those were things that I sought out later in my life. I mean, Carl again asks, like, how do you balance aggression with compassion? Because violence begets violence. And I think, I mean, for me, the thing to keep in mind is like aggression isn't necessarily like it's a feeling. Like anger is a feeling, and it's feeling it isn't bad. It's how you act on it. It's how you bring it out into the world. And so you can take aggression and let it be the fuel to your actions, so that hold lines and speak out at times that might otherwise you might want to, fear might otherwise hold you back. So it's a question of how do you use your aggressive nature or those responses? How do you use that anger? Compassion similarly isn't just tolerating everything. I kind of wanted to I didn't want to bring us down on like a bad note to end,
No,
but to
it's
go back to
okay.
like the community building thing and like how do you build good support structures and build good communities. One of the other things is holding boundaries and creating boundaries, like recognizing when someone is a problem that you could maybe talk to and find a way to fix, or when someone is a problem that they're too toxic to keep around. It's somebody you need to be able to like create a wall to and say you can't be here anymore until you go fix your shit.
Right,
And
exactly.
yeah, and I think there's a certain amount of it's that's a hard conversation to have with someone, and I think it takes a certain amount of anger and outrage sometimes to even be able to have that conversation, and to like see that the boundary needs to be there, to like be pushed to a point where you are willing to push back. And as a community leader, it's how you choose to push back. Do you just use your words? Do you set an example, or do you like lash out? Do you respond unthinkingly? You'd mentioned realizing like the number of people you impact when you talk, when you make an Instagram post, like there are people you influence. And so you you have to like have this balance where you're not overthinking every single thing you do. Like you want to be yourself and be genuine, but you also have to be very aware, what might the repercussions of my actions be? What might the repercussions of my words be now that I am an example that people look up to? So we have to, always act with intention. Uh, let's see, Victoria, feel free to dismiss this message, but those who know me know I have a deep voice. Uh, Tariq, you have a nice singing voice. Being trans, my voice makes me self-conscious. How did you overcome or accept?
Oh, I appreciate that. That is a good question, and it's definitely not an easy answer because uh, there's a lot of trial and error in life, But ultimately, it's all about embracing who you are. And if you notice when I'm singing, there's like deeper parts and higher parts, and so I I I acknowledge that every part of me is a part of me. Even if it's like I rather I could have sung that in a higher voice. I would would love to sing it more operatically in a higher register or something like that. And it's like, well, there's a range that I have in my speaking voice. Like sometimes what was the movie? This is a good example. Um, movie Valerian in the city of a thousand planets or something like that.
Okay,
Valerian.
yeah, yeah.
And the director, he directed Fifth Element, you know, uh, a long time ago. Fifth Element. It's
Multipass. Mhm.
multi-pass. So it's called multi-pass. And so in the Valerian, there's like I won't ruin the movie, but we'll say in terms of alien races, there's a lot of in the movie, but one particular alien race is very androgynous, where uh, feminine faces, but very tall uh, and very astute, statuesque, strong stances, and sort of a blend between masculine and feminine. But the voices sound predominantly female with a slight militant tone to it. Which was really attractive to me in terms of embodying that. I was like,
Mm.
oh, I really have that voice. That's the voice I want. My voice doesn't sound like that. It sounds like this. And I was like, well, I still like the voice I have. I like that voice more in the
Yeah.
movie. But in terms of that feeling of release, in terms of like how to overcome it, it's like as long as I can feel at least some like release and celebrate the person I am, and not everybody has to like it, but this how you, Victoria, had appreciated that. That helps me appreciate me. You know, the fact that you reached out and showed like you felt connection to that song and similarity to my own struggle, that we're celebrating each other. You know, so in a sense, this how I said earlier, like it's harder to be completely a positive thinker solitarily, like just by yourself. Like you can stay inside sometimes, but you have to connect in some way with other person. In order to truly be yourself, you have to be able to expand your experience to some degree with another person. So that's how you did right there, Victoria. That's how I did because I felt a connection to you, and so through that, I feel like well, I'm being myself, and so that's okay with me, you know.
And since we should probably like
Okay.
wrap things up, well, Carl, if you're looking for a copy of the Vampire Codex, you can get it on Amazon. Also, there is a free copy donated in perpetuity to sacred-texts.com. And if you look Vampire Codex up there, you can get the free copy. There's additions and like stuff that was added to the one that is like literally for sale, but you can find it pretty much wherever. I know there was also a question, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter. I know I'm patreon.com/haunted, and you can find me under Seth Anakim, SETHANIKEEM, everywhere else. So Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, I'm under all of that. And how about you?
Oh, similar to that, like Tarik Rever, TARIKREVER. Thank you, thank you so much.
Yep.
But
My
yeah,
wife is on top of things.
she's been awesome. Totally appreciate that. But yeah, and so my Instagram, Facebook, Tarik Rever, my website, tarikrever.com. So that literally shows up everything. Like you mentioned earlier, you type in Google and everything comes up. You know, so I'm pretty easy to find that way. Um, but yeah, oh, also there is something coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure this month, Kuden, Kuden. They're a Japanese fashion line, and they make couture clothing. And I'm representing their America side of their fashion there
Oh,
in
cool.
Japan. And so I found them because they had a disabled model. I was like, hey, I'm disabled too. And say, yeah, you are. Like, yeah, you have a good look. We like to work with you. And I was like, oh, thank you. So I'll be wearing custom-made, modernized kimonos for Kuden.
Oh, cool.
You know,
Oh, and
so
that will completely fit. Like you've just got such a look for it too.
oh,
So
thank you.
yeah.
I'm so happy with that. So keep your eyes peeled for on my Instagram for Kuden within this month. So that's coming up soon.
Cool. All right. Well, this was lovely. I actually have a D&D game to prep for.
That sounds
Because
cool.
I also GM on top of everything else. So I should probably get going fairly soon. This was wonderful. Hopefully we can maybe do it again.
I look forward to that. It's so
Mhm.
cool.
So thank you. Thank you, everybody. And
Thank you,
have a
everybody.